So I heard about this incident in Toronto. Long story short, there's a photographer. He's taking pictures of an intersection. There's a Muslim woman who is crossing the intersection while he's taking a picture. Instead of politely going to him and asking him to retake the picture after she's left, she instead demands that he has no right to take pictures. When he informs her of his right, instead of simply asking politely that he take a picture after she's gone, her immediate response is to hit him in the face. As if this demonstrous lack of civility were not enough, the photographer is then surrounded by a mob of Arab speakers demanding that he turn over his camera for vandalization. So this guy conveniently notices a police officer is nearby, goes to him, reports this situation, and the police officer says that they can't do anything about it because the lady was trying to hit his camera and not hit him in the face. First off, this is ridiculous. This situation is ridiculous. Even if the claim were completely true, that is still vandalism. She intentionally chose to drop a civil means of addressing the situation without even trying, under the pretense of her religion, in favor of a violent solution. Now, I am wondering, what would have happened if the police officer wasn't there? I'm thinking this guy would have had his property vandalized at best, and he could have had the crap beaten out of him and potentially been crippled or killed at worst. This type of mob behavior should not be acceptable in civilized society. How can our society have the audacity to call itself civil when we allow situations like this to happen? Are the Toronto police so afraid of Muslim violence that they refuse to address Muslim crime? History doesn't work that way. If there were no police officer there, this guy would have been victimized in a criminal activity. The only question is how dramatic a scale would the criminal behavior have been? But I have a better question for you. Does the scale even matter? You know what I think? I think this man would have had every right to pull out a gun and kill the woman. People in so-called civilized society become so uncomfortable when you use the word kill. You know what else I think? I think that if the mob attacked him, he would have been justified to pull out a gun and kill all of his attackers, and then shoot those whom had attacked him and were fleeing in the back. Yes, I think that one man killing 5 or 10 people or more in this situation would have been entirely justified. You know, I think the Western world treats Muslims with a very condescending air. We don't treat them as equal people in society. They're being held to a different legal standard because they're viewed as children, as lesser human beings, incapable of adult behavior. They're not people, they're Muslims. How dare we expect a dog to behave like a human being? Muslims aren't people. Why should we expect them to behave like people? I think the problem is most people look at the phrase violent Muslim mob and they see the keyword as Muslim, when in fact that's the least important word. They are a violent mob, and that is the bottom line. I am fully in favor of an atheist or a Christian pulling out a gun and killing 10 or 20 Muslims who are attacking them, just as I am in favor of a Muslim who is being mobbed by some other group that may not have the same beliefs as him, defending himself and killing 10 or 20 Christians or atheists. You know, the real people who have a right to be offended by this incident are peaceful Muslims. They have every right to be offended that this photographer didn't have the right to defend himself against a mob. You know what I think? I think that if he pulled out a gun and killed the people mobbing him, including those who would have turned tail and ran when he pulled a gun out, he should have been able to kill 5 or more people and walk away from the situation without any legal penalties whatsoever. You want to know why I think that? Well, there's a lot you can learn from old books. Historically speaking, this incident is what we call mob rule. We appease the mass of people because the desires of the many beat the desires of the one. Note that I say desires, not needs. The problem with this is that it is not something a society can sustain for any protracted period of time. It's usually one of the factors that result in civilizations or nations losing power over the course of 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Just because an angry mob shows up demanding to lynch someone doesn't mean that the police should allow the lynching. In this case, the scale was slightly different. It was a mob vandalization of property and potential lynching. But I don't really see a difference. It's a criminal activity done by a mob either way. Now you might say to me as a counterpoint, well, if this guy pulled out a gun and defended himself and killed the attackers, well, Muslim violence would go up. There might be riots. And my response to you is this: let them riot. Let them gather and protest. And when they start becoming violent and vandalizing property and hurting people, arrest them, spray them with tear gas, and shoot them with bullets. This is not oppression against Muslims. You know why? Because the actual peaceful Muslims won't be participating in these riots. People draw too much attention to the word Muslim. In all the things I just said, be honest. How much of what I have said so far sounds like it's a response to address Muslims to you? Be honest. But once again I state, violent mob activity is not something a society can sustain. If you have to have a few riots so that you can draw the violent ones out and arrest or kill them, then that's just what has to be done. Because this is the real world, not a cuddly, kissy schoolyard playground where an adult is watching over your every move. Welcome to reality. It's dark. It's violent. Life isn't fair. What we have now is mob rule. We allow incidents like this to take place because we will sacrifice the one guy in order to keep the greater number of people docile for a period of time. You know what that is defined as? Human sacrifice. We conduct our modern-day civilized human sacrifices differently than the nations of the past. We say to ourselves, we throw people under the bus to keep the bloodlust of the passengers on the bus satisfied, and if we don't, they will get off the bus and riot. And that's totally different from killing someone because we think the sun won't rise tomorrow if we don't kill them. It's totally different. Spoiler alert, I might disagree on that note. How can our modern society call itself civil when we practice human sacrifice? And then, being the hypocrites we are, turn around and call someone else's human sacrifice primitive and barbaric? How can we possibly justify that in any objective way? It's like a pig that wallows in muck all day long, turning to another pig and telling the other pig that that pig's particular brand of muck is somehow unacceptable. We are still sacrificing humans out of fear. In this case, it is the fear of the actions of other humans, not the sun god. But we are still doing the same thing in principle. We are a civilization that regularly conducts human sacrifices, and if you're in favor of these human sacrifices, then you are just as guilty as the people who physically carry out that sacrifice. Here's something people need to understand. Not all Muslims are violent. In fact, a fellow I know who is a Muslim tells me that he doesn't even consider violent Muslims to actually be Muslims by definition. He suggests to me that violent people use the religion of peace as a hat, and claim to be Muslims and believe themselves to be Muslims, just like a monkey climbs up a tree and thinks himself tall. And here in our ever-tolerant Western society, we treat Muslim people as a whole with the expectations we would put on animals. We do not penalize them because we don't view them as intelligent enough beings to really qualify as humans. And as such, we treat them with a subhuman standard. You're right when you think that if the man pulled out a gun and defended himself, there might be riots. But not all Muslims in the world will participate in these riots. Stop generalizing them. They need to be treated like people, not animals, and with being a person come certain responsibilities and the penalties for failure. At least the riots would draw out the violent ones so they can be killed or arrested. Doesn't that comment sound dark to you? Does it sound sociopathic to you? Well, on that note, you may be wondering about something I said earlier. You remember earlier in the video when I said that not only would the photographer, in my opinion, be justified in killing the woman, but also all the other people mobbing him, including those who were turning and running away from him after he pulled out the gun. You remember that comment, right? And you know what? I firmly believe it. Does that make me sound like a sociopath to you? Well, would you like to know why I believe it? Like I said, historically speaking, mob rule cannot be sustained forever. And the longer a civilization tries to sustain it, the worse the problems get. Drawing the violent ones out into a riot and crushing them is a much better long-term alternative, and the best part is that no peaceful Muslims would be harmed in the process. When you think of the word Muslim, a lot of people automatically think violence, because these violent groups misrepresent the whole. Ask yourself this. If the violent Muslims were suddenly removed from Western society, and there were no more violent crimes conducted by Muslims, do you think Muslims in general would keep any sort of negative, violent stereotype for very long? I don't think they would. Now you may be wondering, but that doesn't address the issue of why it should be justified and legal to shoot the violent Muslims in the back as they flee. Well, he's certainly not justified in trying to shoot a peaceful Muslim who's attempting to stop the mobbing, but he's very justified to shoot the people who are running away from him after they attacked him. You know why? Because they failed their responsibilities as human beings. Modern society teaches people that self-defense is wrong. I was told in 3rd grade that if I called the police, they would arrive in 1 second. I was told in 5th grade that they would arrive in 1 minute. This was not education in some third world country. This was in California. And it was a blatant lie being given to children. I could go on all day about a K-12 education. But if you would let those violent mob members go, because they are violent mob members, not violent Muslims, the word Muslim is irrelevant. If you let them go, they're just going to go mob somebody else later. You have every justification from a sociological and historical standpoint to chase down and kill someone who attacked you. Yes, there's a small chance that they, having had a gun pointed at them, will change their ways and stop being violent. There's a small chance of this. But is it really worth placing another innocent person's life on the line for the benefit of someone who already made it clear that they have violent intentions? And I think the answer is no. That criminal's life isn't worth that much. How do you objectively define their life as worth that much? I would love to see a way. Feel free to leave a comment about that. Once again, it is not wrong to conduct violence in self-defense. It is not wrong to brutalize rioters, provided you don't brutalize the people trying to stop the riot and the police don't initiate the violence. You know, I've been called a sociopath numerous times because of my violent stance on self-defense. On the fact that we should treat criminals like people, not animals. That we should expect them to behave like people and punish them accordingly when they fail to do so. I've been told that I'm a sociopath for intentionally allowing a riot to take place, specifically so the rioters can be terminated. I've been told that I am a sociopath for saying that if a man has to kill in self-defense, he should be allowed to keep a trophy to mark his accomplishment and his bravery. But no one seems to have any objective way to define these things as bad apart from their own personal opinion and current society's standards. The personal opinions of people who conduct human sacrifices to maintain the illusion that if they sacrifice someone once in a while, the sun will keep rising. And I pity them. But if thinking that the photographer was entitled to kill 10 to 20 people because he, a Christian, an atheist, a Muslim, whatever his personal beliefs are, because they don't even matter, if it makes me a sociopath to think that he was justified to stand up and say, no, I don't want to be thrown under the bus, I'm choosing not to be thrown under the bus. If it makes me a sadistic person to take pleasure in making society a safer place by shooting those people in the back as they run, if it makes me a sociopath to do that, if it makes me a sadist to do that, then I am proud to be a sociopath and a sadist. According to history, would be a safer and more peaceful society. Don't believe me? Look at gun bans and their crime rates, then compare them to places that allow people to carry weapons for self-defense. I'll see you next time. Feel free to leave a comment trying to challenge the ideology, or a comment that agrees with me. It doesn't matter. This is a free-thinking video. Feel free to leave your opinion. And you've just heard mine. I'll see you next time.